People who got fired for the stupidest reason. What happened? This happened over 20 years ago at a medical insurance company. I didn't sue them mostly because I was young and I just didn't know that could be a thing. I'd do it again. I wasn't looking for kudos. Someone needed help, so I did what was needed. I didn't have any idea it was against company policy. We certainly didn't cover it in my training class. Oh, and the lady didn't call her insurance company instead of 911. We were trying to solve an issue with one of her claims. I came back to her having an emergency after I had her on hold. Here it is. I worked in customer service call center for an insurance company. A customer called in and had a medical emergency, probably a heart attack, but I'm not sure. I used the phone in the empty cubicle next to me to call 911 and stayed on both lines to be sure that EMS got to her. I was fired because A, I took too long on calls already and this was exceptionally long, B, I made an unauthorized outgoing call, and C, I gave the customer's personal information, name and address, out to 911. Narrator's commentary. Surely a call to 911 isn't an unauthorized outgoing call, right? I feel like, medical emergencies should take precedence. But I guess companies aren't known for caring about their workers a whole lot, huh? Next story. During my senior year in high school, I was working at McDonald's. It was right after Christmas and we were really busy. I'd been there for 4 hours. I had 2 to go. Was supposed to get a 30-minute break. Since we'd slowed down, I asked if I could take it. The shift manager said no one was getting breaks. I said thanks a lot. She told the assistant manager, pretty sure they were sleeping together, that I told her to screw off and he fired me on the spot. Wouldn't even let me give my side of the story. A week later, I was working at Jack in the Box. Was a shift manager in 6 months. Did that through a couple of years of college and dropped out, never wanted to go anyway, and moved up to assistant manager and then a couple years later, general manager. I remembered how crappy I was treated at McDonald's and made sure I treated my employees well. Had the 3rd lowest turnover rate in a 95 restaurant region. Had the 2nd highest average hourly pay, and number 2 in profit improvement. Take care of your people and they'll do the same for you. Next story. I got fired from my first ever job as a CIT, counselor in training, at the summer day camp I went to every year as a kid. I was given the 6 and 7-year-olds. One of them asked me if I had a girlfriend. In a girls are gross, why would you do that sort of way? I said yes. He asked me if I ever kiss her, and I said yes, in a, fun horror movie voice manner. He was like, ew, gross, and we all had a laugh. I thought it was a fun exchange. Well, I guess the kid went home and told his mom that night, and she freaked out. Demanded I be fired for teaching her kid about banging and giving details of my intimate life to her child. I was 13. All I said was that I kissed a girl. The camp fired me right there. I had no idea what I said was out of line. Next story. I got fired from Sonic when I told them I was no longer going to be available for last-minute call-ins because I'd gotten a second job. My boss was not happy because I lived the closest. So he stormed off and started screaming, "Guess this is OP's last day. I hope you're happy." I tried to clarify I'd still be available for set shifts. I just wouldn't be on call anymore. He screamed at me to shut up. I hadn't clocked in yet and I could sense a tantrum, so I asked if I should even bother clocking in. He threw a burger at me and told me to get the hell out, so I did. They had a drive-through line wrapped around the building and I was the only non-family employee on until 3. Next story. I got a middle-level position at the company where they boasted how family-oriented they are. They're the kind of company that has a small arcade and putt-putt and ping-pong table and encouraged people to relax and play them. After a month of being there, I decided to play some coworkers in ping-pong since I'm pretty decent at it. The owner and his son end up walking through the doors and see me playing and challenge me. I play the son and absolutely demolish him. He got extremely upset and walked away after throwing the paddle at me. Later that week, I was fired for, quote, not fitting with the culture. Next story. I was, politely let go because my manager decided I was lying about having surgery without ever talking to me. I let her know 2 weeks in advance and reminded her 5 different times, 3 different ways, but the schedule never changed to reflect the time I needed. I took my 3 days off and she had another manager call me to ask me where I was on the second day. The manager who called me was horrified to learn that yes, I had surgery, yes, I was hopped up on pain meds, and yes, the main manager knew about this. Main manager was also mad that I had poor performance the week following, which is something I had noted when I told her about the surgery. I needed a week of low-impact work as I recovered. One week I noticed I wasn't on the schedule at all and I was talking to the manager who'd called me about it. I jokingly wondered if it was because of my surgery. She basically told me she couldn't legally say yes, but I wasn't wrong. Main manager notified me a couple days later. Part of me is mad, but part of me is relieved I'm not in such a toxic place anymore. Next story. story. Got fired from a public library for taking 2 carts to collect books from the outside drop box instead of 1. The past times I emptied the drop box on a Monday, it required 2 trips, so hey, I brought 2 carts instead. It turns out the matter of how many carts were used in emptying the drop box was a matter of a library board vote, and I was in violation of a town ordinance. Mind you, I wasn't fired. I was placed on paid administrative leave pending a library board inquiry, at which I was welcome to call witnesses. I couldn't keep a straight face, so I resigned. Next story. Kind of fired, I guess. Got a job offer and they wanted me to start ASAP, but told them I want to give my job at least a week's notice. Turned in a 1-week notice. Later in the day, went to our scheduled breaks 5 minutes late because I was busy doing something at work that I just couldn't put down. So I came back 5 minutes late. Manager came up to me acting really mad and said I was fired for abusing breaks. I just laughed, handed him my badge, and started walking to my car. He tried stopping me, saying HR needed to see me to fill out paperwork. I laughed even more, got in my car, and left. Took the week off to relax before starting my new job. OP has a level of not caring I aspire to. I just know my butt would have been like, oh yeah, I'll be right back in to sign the papers. Do I have a backbone? It's up in the air. Could go either way, really. Next story. It was my second job after high school. I was 18 going on 19. I was a parts delivery driver for a local auto parts store. All the drivers had to report to a dispatcher. She would tell us where to go and what to do. Basically, my supervisor. She had at least 10 to 12 years on me, so I was basically fresh meat in the store. After 4 months or so, she started getting more comfortable with me. She would rub my shoulders and try to give me back rubs, would buy me lunch, would text me on weekends inviting me for drinks. This one weekend, she was being a little too persistent in texting me, so I politely told her I wasn't interested. Well, come Monday morning, I got fired because apparently I hadn't been doing my job properly. Next story. I worked at this hotel doing afternoon/evening shift and 2 overnight shifts a week. They listed the following reasons of letting me go. Claimed I was leaving property without clocking out because I wasn't on camera the entire time. The date they said specifically was an evening that I spent cleaning up the meeting space because it was slow. I was also not the only front desk person on shift. Also, when working overnight, I had to fold linens, so I would listen to the radio/music through a Bluetooth headset while folding and cleaning up the back. That was also not allowed, even at midnight or early morning. They honestly probably just didn't like me, but after they fired me, I went and got a new job at the hotel next door, started making a lot more money. I was able to do all the things I was let go for, too. Next story. I got fired for following the rules. In undergrad, I was a tutor for the local school district. The main perk of the job was that if I needed a day off for a test or to study, I could take it, as long as I told my supervisor. Well, I told my supervisor, followed all the rules, and she's like, "You can't call off, you're fired." Turns out, when anyone else needed a day off, they just didn't show up, and supervisors had no way of knowing since we just walked into the schools and signed our own hours. So it looked like I was the only one that ever asked off. Next story. Basically, I got fired for stealing an original Furby back in the day by putting it into layaway. And when my shift came, there was a special edition Furby at my register, so I said, screw it, and put it in layaway before they closed up. 3 days later, my next day at work, I was called into the office halfway through my shift and was accused of theft and fired. I asked them point blank, "How the hell can you fire me for theft when the item is sitting in the store?" They claimed I backstocked the item for myself by telling people it was on hold. Never happened. They demanded that I get it out of layaway and return it. Told them to screw off, went to pay it off, was payday, and walked out the store. There was a cop outside that they flagged down. Told him I stole the item and the cop asked for my receipt, which I gave to him with a huge smile on my face. Manager was still out in the parking lot talking to the cop as I drove by and flipped him off. Next story. Worked at Best Buy in the mid-90s when I was 16. I worked selling computers and was pretty good at it. We also sold things like memory and hard drives that were behind lock and key. Part of our job was to take the tagged inventory from the trucks and put it on the shelves. This included said memory. So I close one night, put away all the new inventory, lock it up, and hand the keys to the manager. They do their checks of our department and we leave for the night. Next day I'm scheduled, I go in, and the loss prevention manager says he has me on video stealing memory. I laughed and said, "Show me the video." Well, I'm somewhat tall, red hair, and white. The video he shows me has an older, very short, white guy with a shaved head. He told me that was me and that I was fired. He only showed me the video once and immediately turned off the monitor. Being 16, I didn't know any better. Said some things on the way out, like, screw you, screw this place, and the like, and I left. Turns out the loss prevention guy and his son were stealing for years to the tune of $250,000. and the guy on the video he showed me was his son. Anytime problems popped up of missing inventory, they just fired a random person to keep the attention away from themselves. When police arrested them, their house was loaded with televisions, computers, everything from the store. Next story. I started a new job based on the knowledge and transferable skills I had from a previous job. On the first day in the new office, another one of the newish employees gave me the ominous warning, I don't think you know what you got yourself into. My boss had inherited the department and knew nothing about what we did, and couldn't log into the system without help. She said my coworkers who had been there 20 years would train me. Those coworkers refused to train me because, quote, they aren't my boss, and said to just figure it out as I went along, but then refused to let me work on any projects with them. Then they complained to my boss that I didn't know what I was doing, so I was fired. Why would employees gatekeep a job? The only reason I can think of is ego, because they don't lose anything by you being there unless they're scared of you replacing them or something. I don't know, this is a weird situation. Next story. Fired after a week of employment for not being Christian. I worked for 1 week at a locally owned coffee shop as a teen. During my interview, it was obvious that the owners, manager interviewing me, and the staff were all very religious. I didn't grow up in a religious household, but it didn't bother me at all to be around devout Christians. I was a very preppy, good girl type, so people assumed I was a conservative Christian anyway. Anyway, I was prepping some stuff in the back on a busy weekend, and a couple of coworkers were talking about mission trips. I didn't have anything to add, so I didn't say anything at first. One of them turned to me and asked me if I ever went on a mission trip, and I responded, I never went on one. But they seem pretty interesting. They told me it's easy, just go to my church and see what programs they offer. I responded that unfortunately I don't have a church. I've never been to church before. They were both like, oh, okay then, no worries, and went back to their conversation. The manager overheard the conversation and called me into her office. She fired me on the spot saying I didn't fit in. Didn't give any further explanations or examples of what I did wrong. I was devastated because I had no idea what she was talking about. I knew she was a bit of a nut though. In my week of being there, she'd say stuff like, oh, you're planning on going to a liberal arts college? I tried that once, but I couldn't stand the professors that forced their views of evolution onto their students. Did you know that Darwin retracted his theory on his deathbed? That's how I know it's false. But she's the manager, so all I did was smile and nod. To those thinking, you should have sued or reported them. Yeah, I was 17. I didn't know that type of thing was illegal. Next story. My brother worked part-time in a hardware store. In winter, the low season, the store would stop scheduling the newest employees and would start scheduling them again in spring. My brother was one of the new guys and wasn't scheduled in the winter. In the middle of spring, he went to check when he would start again. There was a new manager he didn't know, and she told him he wasn't on the employee list without a reason. Apparently, they just assumed he wouldn't work again and terminated him without telling him. Since we have good labor laws, my brother got a few thousand in settlement for lost income. Next story. My husband and I worked at the same place. He worked full-time in a completely different area, and I worked 1 day a week doing something unrelated to what he did. We didn't even see each other on the job besides when we took a break. Anyway, he got laid off because they had to cut his team down, and I got fired because we were married. Did my job great. Never had issues. Worked there for years. Didn't matter. I even said I understand that they have to lay him off, and I wasn't upset. He had another job that day that paid double, so it was actually a good thing. But they didn't care and still fired me. Oh, and on top of this, I was 3 months pregnant and we just told them. So not sure if that was a reason too. Next story. Back in the day, I had a part-time job at a convenience store. The manager was swapping out franchise-branded coffee grounds for Costco coffee to save money, as he got a bonus based on store profitability. I knew, but didn't care. He wasn't robbing me. And let's be realistic, Costco probably provided better coffee grounds. When he got caught and fired by the corporate owner, he phoned me up and fired me on the assumption I sold him out. Not sure that someone who no longer has a job could fire me, but I didn't care, as I had given my notice to the assistant manager a few hours earlier that I would be quitting in a week, or earlier if they found someone. I was able to collect a 2-week severance payment instead. Next story. I got laid off because of COVID, but my supervisor in HR made sure to tell me they wanted to fire me with cause because my supervisor didn't want me working there. I wasn't one of her favorites. I'd been working with the company for 5 years, almost to the day. I had more experience than my supervisor and knew every job in the warehouse, and I was efficient at all of them. I'm sure my supervisor fabricated issues about me and embellished the littlest things so she had reason to get rid of me. This wasn't the first time she had done this, and since I'd been gone over a year, there have been 5 or 6 people quit or or be fired because of her, equal to almost half of the people in the warehouse total. Next story. When I was 14, I worked at a chip shop in my hometown. I only had the Friday night shift, but I covered pretty much every other shift people couldn't do, so ended up doing 3 or 4 extras a week too. I was also never once late. This one day, I was asked to cover someone's shift later that day, which I agreed to. However, my dad had a pretty bad stroke not long after. I tried phoning the owner all day and got no answer. I finally managed to get a hold of him 20 minutes before my shift, explaining I couldn't come in as my dad was in hospital and might die. He fired me on the spot. Apparently, I wasn't reliable. My dad didn't die, although was left permanently disabled, but the chip shop actually went out of business not long after, so silver linings and all that. Next story. My daughter was fired for refusing to clock out before finishing her shift. She was young and didn't know better the first few times, but when she mentioned it to me before going to work this next day, I told her to refuse and I would deal with it. This is a giant fast food chain with franchise owners. I called the owner of this store. They proudly published their name and number and explained what had been happening. I also called the State Department of Labor. My wife called the manager and made her cry. The manager was fired that evening and my daughter was paid generously for the estimated hours she had worked off the clock. Next story. I started working at a place a month or so ago, and at first, it seemed so cool. It was an outside bar, and my job was primarily on the pizza station, stretching and shaping the dough, topping, slicing and garnishing, as well as taking the pizzas to the customers most of the time. On top of that, I did seem to lend my time to the other stations like bar and floor whenever I could, as it was at points very understaffed. That and the incompetent management made it unbearable. The event that led to me getting the sack? Well, one day I accidentally read the wrong number on a ticket indicating the table number. My bad, not something that happens often. It didn't help that the table I took the pizzas to by mistake accepted them, even though they didn't order any pizzas between the 3 of them. It was only when I took the third and final pizza they questioned whether the third pizza was theirs, whilst already starting the first 2. I thought nothing of it and carried on. 30 minutes passed and the table that was meant to get the pizzas flagged up, and we realized the situation immediately. We bang out the missing pizzas in minutes. I personally go and apologize to the table, and the table that accepted the pizzas agreed to pay for them. At this point, I didn't see any further problem. Everybody got a happy ending. I misread the ticket, I knew what I'd done, and to be honest, felt pretty stupid about it. What didn't need to happen is that the supervisor, a middle-aged woman trying desperately to grasp onto relevance by butting in conversations and trying to one-up everything you say, but also being super insecure about her authority, so stamping her feet to enforce it when it simply isn't necessary, to come over and make a scene. She runs over after everything is sorted and rambles on, "Listen, calm down, read, yes?" Super loud, super condescending in front of a full garden of customers. I didn't know what to say at first, so I sort of just did that thing where you kind of laugh to fill the silence and said, "Okay." But she didn't think I was taking it seriously enough. Bearing in mind at this point I'd estimated delivering almost 1,000 individual pieces to their correct tables, not making a single screw-up. Whereas to me it very much seemed like this woman was making stupid screw-ups every day. She comes back moments later, slightly more frustrated, and is still talking to me like a child. I respond calmly and say I'd prefer if she didn't talk to me like that, especially in front of customers. She storms off again. At this point I'm cooking a pizza and she is getting extremely aggressive, showing teeth, very animated, trying to be intimidating. I stick to what I had said, disagreeing with her notion that she's my boss and can pull me up for something if necessary. But my point was that it wasn't. I try to argue this, but before long I realized my attention had been diverted from the pizza oven for too long, and the pizza I cooked had started to catch, rendering it useless. I'm visibly annoyed by this because it's a waste of product and my time. Again, she storms off. Not before long, she's back at the absolute peak of anger, making a scene for the sake of her ego. I simply say, "I think she should have this chat after service. Don't you?" Looking at her dead in the eyes and knowing I would be quitting or fired before I got the chance. She had such an emotional reaction she had to go sit in a dark room for 10 minutes, leaving the floor so only one person was seating and taking out drinks. They sent me home and asked me to come in for an interview about it the next day. I never returned. Next story. This job had an app or website that would post the schedule. My boss made a habit of changing our schedules the night before at like 10 p.m. or later. Then she would get angry with me if I was too late or too early or wanting to go home on time before she made the last minute change. I told her that the union rules of our field stated that the schedule should be posted 10 days in advance, with exception of emergencies, which was never the reason. She just didn't plan well. On a Wednesday before a planned vacation, they asked me to leave a key for the temp. That Friday, I got an email that I was fired. Not a good start for my vacation. Do these managers expect people to show up when they change the schedule that late? Like, I want to be in their heads. Do they genuinely believe the employees live for the company? Because that's what it sounds like. That's the only reason I can think of checking work schedules religiously at like 10 p.m. Crazy work, man. Next story. I got fired from Home Depot because they thought I was a lesbian. Worked there for 2 years without ever getting written up or in trouble, although I had a few sick days. They hired this lesbian girl who was pretty vocal about it. We became friends really quickly because she was awesome and fun. Nothing romantic, though. We hung out after work a lot, but never worked in the same area together because it definitely would have been a distraction. After that, I was constantly being written up and talked to, although nothing had changed in my performance. Was fired a month after she got hired for being away from my station, although I was helping a customer 5 feet and within sight of my register. Next story. My father was in hospice care and his death was imminent. Asked my supervisor if I could telework for a few days so I could be with him when he passed. This was 2019, before telework became the norm. I was approved but had to document what I was working on hour by hour. Not an issue since my dad pretty much slept due to medication up until he passed. My boss and I were both fired for not clearing this with HR before proceeding, even though I had documented proof that I was doing company business for 8 hours a day while I was out. Next story. I was once fired from a temp job because I made a joke about fixing a label maker that a coworker didn't understand. We were relabeling shelves in a small warehouse, and the label maker would jam like every 3 labels. It wasn't easy to pull the damaged label out, so I said, "Gee, I wish we had a pair of needle-nose pliers." Idiot coworker replies, "Needle what now?" I was like, "Needle nose pliers," which was met with a blank stare. You've never heard of needle nose pliers? Head shake on non-recognition. Wow. Needle nose pliers are incredibly useful. You can build anything with needle nose pliers. You could build a watch or a nuclear warhead or a French poodle. Anything. About a half hour later, the floor manager finds me and tells me they no longer require my services. When I ask why, they said someone told them I had been talking about building bombs. Next story. I took a filing gig with a working interview. The filing lady was being promoted. The lady asked if I knew my alphabet. Yes, I do, thanks. Turns out her system was crap. Hazel Freda was filed under H, and Bob Dylan was filed under D. I dared question this, and I was also not as fast as her on my first day. You know, the lady with the crap system she made up and had been doing for 10 years. At first, I was insulted. I've never been let go for doing a bad job before. Boy, was that a hellish control freak bullet dodged. Next story. I was only ever fired from one job in my entire life, and it wasn't my fault at all. I got something like 10 minutes of training, and because I didn't immediately absorb that, they got mad at me for not doing the job. The person who trained me said they usually have an instruction book, but it got lost, so that tiny amount of training was it. When I asked her questions, she would pretend to not have heard me, and just got more annoyed the more questions I asked. Sorry for wanting to do the job right, Mrs. Whiny McJerkington. Opie, we gotta be careful about calling people McJerkington. I feel like that might give off the wrong impression in some contexts. Next story. I was fired because I refused to work on my day off. The original job was 20 hours a week. After a year, I was there 6 days a week from about 7 to 4. I explained I will not work Saturdays. It's for religious reasons. I came in early, stayed late, etc. every other day except Saturdays. My foreman's birthday was on a Saturday and he had to work, along with everyone else. I politely refused. The owner called me afterwards and said if I didn't come in, I was fired. So I was fired. Got unemployment afterwards. This was back in the early 2010s. Next story. I got fired for wearing batting gloves. I worked in a convenience store, so of course I handle cash all day long. Cash also dries the hell out of my hands for some reason, so instead of wearing latex gloves, if I have to take them off at any time putting on a new pair sucks, I wore batting gloves. I did this for months until some customer said something and I was told to take them off. I explained that they helped me do my job better, but the manager wouldn't listen. Went a day without them and it was maddening. Went back to wearing them and was fired a couple days later for insubordination. Ended up working at another store in the same chain with a former assistant store manager / now manager. I have never had a single complaint about my gloves the 2 years I was there. I know this isn't it, but when they say batting gloves, I can only think of a catcher's mitt, and that is hilarious to be working a till with. So that image is what's in my head. Batting gloves? No. A big ol' mitt. Next story. When I was 18, I was fired from a large orange home improvement store whose name rhymes with foam creepo for having a mohawk. The only problem was that I had the exact same mohawk when they hired me. I never changed my hairstyle. I wore a hat every single shift and never missed it, which is what I'd been told to do when I was hired. When I pointed that fact out, the HR manager told me I had been provided a handbook when I was hired that clearly stated my hair was out of uniform, and I was expected to abide by it above all other instructions. There were 6 of us hired leading up to the holiday season, and all of us were fired within a 2-week period for similarly silly reasons, right before the end of our probation. I was the second to last firing. I still think it was them being shady and knowing we were all too dumb to do anything about it. By the time they called me, I knew what to expect. Next story. I doubt anyone will see this, but I was written up, a final written warning, the step before termination, for fixing a typo on a client record without manager permission. My entire job was creating and maintaining client records. I fixed typos all day, but apparently this time I fixed my own typo in a client contact name without alerting my boss that a typo had been made in the first place. I literally typed the name, misspelled it, corrected it, and hit save. I was accused of intentionally hiding mistakes and misleading my manager, and they had gone back and found every typo I had fixed on my own in the 2 years I worked in the department. HR considered all of those valid, even though alerting my manager to all typos wasn't in any employee policy. So I quit on the spot. I should have let them fire me, but I was so sick of the company culture there, I couldn't stand to stay around any longer. I also got written up at a different place for dictating my schedule as a part-time worker. I was in college and asked for finals off. Next story. In college, I got a job at GameStop over one summer. It was okay, and I planned on keeping the job through the next semester. I gave my boss my class schedule and told him I'm in the marching band and won't be able to work on Saturdays because of football games until after October. But I had a pretty open schedule several days a week and the evenings to close if they needed me. First Saturday, he calls me and asks why I'm not in, and I told him I'm at a football game with the marching band for school. Well, they didn't fire me, but I wasn't ever put back on the schedule, so yeah. Really crappy thing to do when I gave you almost a month's notice ahead of time of my new availability. Next story. The female dog hated me from day one. She felt threatened. I had interviewed for an office management job. She got the job and they offered me her old reception job. She could see that I was better than her at it. She started finding fault with everything I did, hardly gave me any real work to do. The final balm was, "Didn't you notice this black mark on the wall? Why didn't you wash it?" she said. "We've cleaning staff. At no time in the history that I've been here has this been mentioned," I said. She actually smirked, and that was the reason I got pulled into a performance meeting. I managed to negotiate a severance package. Luckily, I had others vouch for me who liked me. I used to do a lot of contract work in office management. The cool bosses were men. It's the women I often had problems with, which as a fellow woman was mind-boggling. Next story. My first ever proper job. I was a Christmas temp at Argos, and I got fired for not being able to hit the completely ridiculous sales target they set for me with 0 training. 20% of the sales I made had to be from the insurance we offered on appliances. The fact I had 0 training on their stupidly complicated till system? Tough crap. If you only sold toys and cables and batteries that day? Oh, tough crap. The fact the insurance we offered was worthless garbage, especially compared to the warranty larger items came with, plus the fact most people have home insurance? Tough crap. The manager was a raging female dog and would pull me into her office every couple of days to tell me how much of a pathetic disappointment I was. After about 2 months of my 4-month contract, she fired me, claiming I was one of the biggest letdowns she'd made the mistake of hiring. I later found out that 1, regular permanent staff were not scolded or punished for not hitting the crazy high target, but celebrated if they did, and 2, the store was about to close down. The manager had been deliberately picking on me in the hopes I would quit, and when I didn't quit, she fired me, because if she hadn't, she would have been obligated to find me a new position in another store, and she couldn't be bothered because I was a teenage temp. Basically, she was just a lazy, nasty idiot and made it my problem. It's the worst job I've ever had to this day, and it knocked my confidence for a while. Everything does when you're a teen, but I still thank that ugly bag of bones every day for a very important life lesson. 99% of companies don't care about staff, and 99% of managers will happily torture you to make their life a little easier. It's not a bad lesson to learn young. It's true. The company does not care about you. They will say they do, but they don't. Next story. I got fired for taking time off when my first son was born. Yeah, for the birth of my son. I took a job at this place after my last place and notified us the day before Christmas that we weren't coming back after Christmas. Oof. My wife was pregnant when I took this new job. I notified them during the interview that I would need time off 4 months down the road for the birth of my son. I reminded them at least twice a month. No problem. No problem, they said. 2 months in, they give me a nice raise after seeing me consistently pull 140% productivity over their usually highest productive staff with no safety violations. 3 months in, they start laying night shift off, despite being in the middle of a large building expansion. I started working 12-hour shifts, which often ended up being 16 to 20-hour shifts to cover the staff they let go. I kept reminding them I would need time off. No problem, they said. The time was near. I reminded them yet again a few weeks prior. They said if I took the time off, I would be let go. I told them they should have thought of that before laying everyone else off. My son was born. I took 1 day off for the birth. 1 single day. I called in several hours before my shift. The day I returned ready to work, my manager sat me down, telling me his boss had said to let me go because I defied orders not to call in. Your loss, I said. He tried to apologize. I told him not to because I know he doesn't mean it. I wasn't going to let him soothe his guilt. He either didn't communicate to his boss or he didn't care enough to defend my position. The silver lining, I got to collect unemployment for 6 months while I spent time with my firstborn son. I also made sure to thank the company on numerous occasions for it. They tried to deny the unemployment too. I won the appeal because they had a bad track record of automatically denying unemployment requests and losing the appeals. Thanks again. Next story. I was in college and waitressing at a restaurant that was open all night. The manager refused to make the schedule so that those of us in college would only work the all-nighters on days we didn't have class the next morning. He didn't give a crap if you had class or not. He would still give you an all-nighter. On one such schedule, he gave me 2 all-nighters in a row on the days I had 8 a.m. classes. My shift was 11 to 6, so I would get home just in time to shower and go to class. So I worked 11 to 6, went to class from 8 to 9, then 11 to 1, and then home to study, eat, and try to catch nap. That night, back for another 11 to 6 shift. Home to shower and go to class at 8. Had a break in class from 8 to 1 to eat and study. Then had a 3-hour lab from 1 to 4. Went home, studied, ate, and fell asleep about 6:30 or 7. I didn't wake up until 11:30 because I'd slept through my alarm. I called and said I was on my way and I'm sorry I'm late, but I hadn't slept more than 6 to 7 hours in the last 48 and I'd overslept. Manager fired me over the phone for using, quote, lack of sleep as a reason to miss a shift. And, quote, he was tired of listening to us college kids whine about all-nighters. I had never complained once about my overnight shifts and had never been late. Not once in my 6 months of working there. I'd started in May and was fired right near Christmas. Turned out he found an excuse to fire every single college kid who worked there, and that left him with only 4 waitresses and a scramble to find new ones. However, a huge portion of the workforce was college kids, and word had gotten around. So he had to settle for really old ladies who refused to work overnights, and only had 4 waitresses that would. Sucked to be him. Sucks for the waitresses, you mean. Who cares what happens to him? God forbid people need a basic function such as sleep. Just, the most, I don't even know what to say. We come pre-programmed with this stuff, man. We need it. Tell him try leaving his phone on for 48 hours and see how it does. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I know the defense would be, well, I was in college, I stayed up overnight all the time. Sure, dude, doesn't mean it's good for you. Look how you turned out. Next story. Not me, but my ex-husband. We worked at Burger King together for a long time. It was one day where I was on, but he was off. We had one car, so he drove me to work. District manager was there and in a crappy mood. Ex went into the back to get his jacket he left the day before and got fired for being out of uniform. Store manager called the next day and told him to ignore the district manager. He was just being a jerk. So he did get fired, but didn't? Anyway, here's mine. I worked for a family-owned wing place. Ended up breaking my foot and being out for about 6 weeks. Came back and didn't know boss had changed where we parked. He comes in ranting about the freaking idiot who parked there. I went off and he fired me as I quit. Got home and my manager called and said, so, you'll still be in tomorrow, right? I was the normal opener. Fine, but I'm not working with his dumb butt again. It was him and me the next morning. He never said a thing about it. Food service sucks balls. Next story. They changed my schedule on Christmas Eve after I left and never told me. I got a call at 8:30 a.m. on the 26th asking where I was. I told them it was my scheduled day off. That's when I was informed that my schedule changed. The managers have to get you to initial next to a schedule change so people can't say they didn't know. I asked if my initial was there, and it wasn't. There also wasn't any phone call to me, so further proof that no one informed me of the change. They demanded I come in. I refused. I was with family about an hour away. They fired me for being a no-show. I hated the job, so I didn't care. Next story. I was a cook at Waffle House before I joined the Navy. At one point while I was in, my ship was in the yards, and the job I had didn't really have much to do while we were there. So I got a part-time job at a Waffle House on the weekends I was off duty. I didn't need training, and I still enjoyed cooking at the time. It worked out great for a few months. One day, out of the blue, I get a voicemail from the boss lady that I was fired. It didn't make any sense. Last I heard, I was their favorite cook. I found out later she had tried to call me into work, and I'm guessing she misdialed my number. Whoever she got on the phone screwed with her real hard, and I got fired for it. When I talked to her, she refused to tell me what was said. She insisted that she dialed my number correctly and I should take it up with whoever I let answer my phone. I don't know what year this was in, but if it's in the age of cell phones, you can literally verify if she typed the number right, or if she called at all. If she won't do that, just looking for an excuse. Next story. I work for a professional moving company. I can't slander or name drop for another year as per my signed contract, unfortunately. I got a concussion on the job through no fault of my own. The person who loaded the truck booby-trapped it, essentially. They loaded the truck up, and as we were unloading it, no one knows what's behind these towers of mattresses, hutches, whatever. As we moved a mattress, its metal bed frame slats fell and hit me in the head, giving me a concussion and whiplash. None of my coworkers, who were the most wonderful part of the job, thought it was funny. My managers, however, did. I was ridiculed for getting a concussion and the subsequent constant sickness from it, and the constant pain in my absolutely destroyed neck. They joked about me behind my back to my coworkers, who subsequently told me. Said I said things when I had gotten the concussion initially that were stupid and incoherent, which I did not. I was going to a chiropractor to help alleviate some of the tension in my neck. Appointments they knew about, and I was told that because I was leaving work 15 minutes early to make an appointment like I'd been going to for weeks, that I was receiving, quote, an unexcused absence from work. So the next day I was called 7 times wondering where I was for my shift. I said, "Oh, I thought you might have been confused on what an unexcused absence is, so I'm showing you right now." They didn't like that. But karma's a female dog, because the manager who made fun of me had a stroke, and the boss of the company who issued me the unexcused absence got COVID along with his wife. I still have neck problems to this day. Next story. This happened 3 weeks ago. Was a project manager for a residential home builder new to the area. Company was from a different state. I'm the first PM to build the first houses for the division. Naturally, they make a lot of changes from the original plan sets. It's pretty common that either the plans don't shake out in the field as they do on paper, or that the design teams want to change things anyway. It happens. But all those changes impact the schedule. Rework, rip/replace things, material changes with a back order, etc. My direct boss has been giving me positive feedback the last year. I manage more projects and square footage than the other 2 PMs combined, yet we all get paid nearly the same. In my annual performance review, the EVP of Ops gives me my review instead of my direct boss, which he didn't do for the other 2 PMs. Tells me I'm slower than the other 2 because I went first and I'm the one to discover the issues with the houses. Then I tell the other 2 PMs how to avoid those issues and setbacks. And now I'm under the gun. Many of the reasons he lists are literally made up, not real, or they're so immaterial that I question his competence. I tell him I'm shocked and I have no idea what he's talking about. I can prove it to him with emails and text messages. He disagrees. 3 weeks later, I show up to site and I'm working. He has my new boss fire me. Pretty much everyone is shocked and confused as to what happened. I just got another offer a couple days ago with a better company with the same pay, working on better projects. Screw you, John! Next story. I literally got fired for doing too much work. My boss was moving from one spot to another. Until the new person came in on the old job, I covered the new one. Once my boss came over, he continued to let me do the bulk of the work. The owner finally told him that if he didn't shape up, he'd be fired and I would be in charge. So I got fired. This was a totally unregulated industry, dog racing. I walked around the corner and immediately got a job at another kennel. Lazy guy lost his job within 6 months. Opie, I feel for you for getting fired, but I don't feel for you for working in dog racing. Assuming it's like greyhounds, the stuff that's really bad for them. I don't know, are there like chill dog show type dog races? Probably not. Next story. Got fired by text at 11 a.m. on New Year's Day for my first job. Literally no reason other than, "We don't need you anymore and don't want to pay you." Went in to get my last check and told my coworker who I ran the shop with. He had no idea I was even being fired and was so mad he quit that day. focused on his own business that he had been waiting for someone to replace him for. So now the owner was left to run the shop by himself. It was a nightmare in a few weeks. A year or so later, he got fined for selling pirated software. He got what he deserved in the end. I drive by there now during the day sometimes, and it is always closed. If he had just waited like 6 more months, I would have been graduated from college and could have worked for him full-time because my degree was in exactly what we did for that job. Had it for 4 years. Started volunteering there at 15, and then they hired me to work that summer, then every Saturday during the school year. Never understood the disrespect I got, but refused to talk to the owner since I received that text. Next story. Not me, but an old coworker. Worked at a restaurant with this guy who is one of the top chefs, basically second or third in charge in the kitchen. So he's been around for a while and has a good amount of respect, especially in the back of the house. Restaurant had a deal for employees that if they worked at all that day, they got 30% off any food they ordered. It was near the end of the dude's shift, so he put a pizza order in for himself to take it home. Well, like most good chefs I know, he couldn't drive for legal reasons, so his girlfriend would come take him to work every day and pick him up. About half an hour before his shift ends, she shows up to get him. She was also previously a chef at this restaurant and well respected, so she'd normally show up early and have a couple of drinks at the bar while catching up with her old coworkers and friends. Well, while she's waiting at the bar, the pizza that her boyfriend had ordered gets finished, and the boyfriend had one of the food runners. Our restaurant was way too busy to have servers actually serve their own food, so we hired people just to serve food to tables because servers normally couldn't, bring the pizza out to his girlfriend so he wouldn't forget it in the back. She opens it and eats a slice or two while it's still fresh. Well, the manager on duty, everyone hated this dude. He was super emotional and made rash decisions all the time. Sees her sitting at the bar eating and practically runs over to her, starts yelling, demanding to see the receipt for her pizza. Confused, she hands the receipt over, thinking maybe she got the wrong pizza or something. He takes the receipt, glances at it, and proceeds to slam it back onto the bar, demanding to know why she's ringing food under boyfriend's name. She realizes what he's accusing her of, and she's like, oh, no, he ordered it to take home. It's his pizzas. But like I said, the manager was super emotional and was having none of it. He starts laying into her about lying and theft, basically standing behind the bar yelling at her in a quiet restaurant. He pulls her boyfriend, who has no idea what's going on, out of the kitchen and immediately starts yelling at him too, demanding to know why he's stealing. Dude stays calm and tries to explain what's going on, but the manager wants none of it. Tells him to clock out now on the spot and to leave. Call in the morning to see if he has a job or not. Everyone loved the guy and he was an amazing cook. The head chef fought hard for him, but that particular manager was the brother of the owner, so there wasn't any chance. Dude lost his job, but several years later, and those two are still happily together and working at higher-end restaurants where they're both very happy. The opening line of this one was so funny. Or, not opening line, second paragraph or whatever. The whole, like most good chefs I know, can't drive for legal reasons. I don't know many chefs, and the one I do know can drive, but I don't know, something about it just hits just right. Like my brain immediately understands the connection. I think that's called stereotyping. Next story. Not me, but my boyfriend. He was having COVID-19 symptoms, so he called into his job on Tuesday and Thursday of the same week because he didn't want to risk anyone getting sick if he had it. He didn't, so he went back to work on Saturday of that week. He's about halfway there when his job calls him and tells him they're letting him go. They didn't specify a reason, but it's definitely because he called in for those 2 days. His job would rather hire too many people and fire someone who's already been working there a solid amount of time for keeping people safe than fire the newly hired people who don't do their jobs. Next story. Casino surveillance was watching a guy they believed was the suspect in a homicide. I observed him gambling away and whatnot, but something was off. He looked way too young. Minimum age on the property was 21. Anyway, I approached him, and as I expected, he had no ID. Per the security department policy, I asked him to cash his ticket out and leave the premises, or come back with his ID. Walked him out the doors and didn't look back. 5 minutes later, my supervisor calls me on the radio to come to the office where surveillance is on the phone. He asks me, why did you walk someone out that surveillance was watching? First of all, surveillance never told anyone crap because they operated separately from us in their little monitor cubicle room away and never seen by regular employees. Next day, I go into work and he has termination papers for me for, quote, failing to exercise proper judgment. Went through the company's appeal process and they concluded I simply failed because I let him leave the premises. Basically meaning I was supposed to know this dude was being watched when no one knew anything. So much for following policy. Next story. My boss hit himself in the finger with a BB gun. He told me, but kind of insinuated he didn't want me to tell anyone. One day he has to go to the doctor for it, and someone asked him where he was. I told them he was at the doctor. Then they asked why, and I said because of his finger. They said what happened, and I said he shot it with a BB gun. I'm not very tactful. Anyway, this upset him, something fierce. He basically didn't trust me from then on, and it was seasonal, so when spring came around, he told me he didn't want me there anymore. This was March 2020. Not good timing. Next story. Back in 2016, I quit a job because I took an offer from another agency. 2 months later, this agency fired me between Christmas and New Year's for not being part of the team enough. I was playing Rocket League with other devs most of lunch breaks and talking with other members whenever we were taking breaks together. I don't see how I wasn't enough part of the team, but what I realized is that I did not work a lot in that time. There's supposed to be a big wave of work coming in January, but I guess that wave was clearly going to come later, and they were already paying someone not doing much for 2 months, so they cut their losses. Next story. Got hired at a pastry shop as a dishwasher. Got the job because my uncle was a good friend of the owner. Hours were 6 a.m. until the job was done, usually around noon. One day I finished around 10:30. I'd cleaned all of the dishes and various kitchen appliances. Not one to stick around doing nothing, I went home. A few hours later, boss calls and wants to know where the hell I am. He had a second batch of baking to do and needed me there for cleanup. He never told me beforehand what the plan was. How was I supposed to know? He told me I was, quote, freaking useless, and fired me, as well as the other 2 dishwashers. That following weekend, I'm at a family barbecue, and guess who shows up? Ex-boss starts bad-mouthing me in front of family, saying what a disappointment I was. I told him I wouldn't tolerate being spoken to that way in front of my family. You're a guest here, and since you're not my boss anymore, I'd be happy to kick his butt all the way back to his car. He insulted me some more before my uncle had enough and kicked him out. Screw you, Keith. Next story. My dad got me fired from my dream job. I graduate with a cool degree, look for work, get a great break with a dope clinical investigation lab on a U.S. Air Force base. Check my references, pass the usual background check. I'm stoked. Salary is insane. Commute not bad, living the dream. 2 weeks later, I get called into the boss lady's office and she tells me I need to turn in my badge and to leave the base immediately. I've been let go because I didn't pass the, quote, more extensive background check, and that those with a criminal record cannot work on base dealing with sensitive material. So I sob. No health care, no money, student debt to pay. I called the contractor that hired me and she was like, I have no idea. You passed the background check for us, but not the DOJ. She told me to request my records from the FBI. Mind you, I've done no wrong in my life. Never been arrested. 1 speeding ticket. So I'm absolutely crushed and start calling the FBI like, hey, it's me. What's on my record? I bothered them every day for 2 weeks and got my record in record time. What's on my record, you ask? What caused me to be accused of a criminal past and asked to leave immediately? Well, Dad, when I was 13, I shoplifted from JCP in the mall with my best friend, because, teenage girls. JCP didn't really care, but my do-good father did. To teach me that actions have consequences, he made me go to the local PD, get fingerprinted. I had to do a weekend 8-hour class for bad kids on drugs and alcohol. I don't know, I was scared personally. Had to do 40 hours community service, all to learn a lesson and be a good person or whatever. Juvenile or expunged records are available to the DOJ, and any criminal activity was grounds for termination. So my dad trying to teach 13-year-old me a lesson got me fired 13 years later. I'm still not over it. This is somewhat unrelated, but this just shows to me how stupid the U.S. justice system is. This sort of thing, community service, all that should be like, what's the goal of it? If the goal is just to make you suffer, that's not really doing much. The goal has to be rehabilitation. And if the goal is rehabilitation, then there's no reason that sort of record should stop someone from having a job. Like, you shoplifted when you were 13. Who cares, dude? Your father was a bit heavy-handed with it as well, but I think it's okay, personally. It's not, abusive or anything. Anyway, OP, you deserve it for the record time joke still. Just saying. Next story. This happened 20 years ago, but I was fired for knowing the difference between tin and iron and voicing it. It was my first day at a scrapyard, and they gave me a magnet to check metals. If it was magnetic, it went in one pile, and non-magnetic, another. Simple crap. But when my boss was explaining it, she said that tin and iron are the same metal, just different thicknesses. I was a teenager and kind of ignorant to the ways of the world, so I piped up. Tin and iron are both magnetic, but they're completely different metals. I was left to sort the piles, and on the way out for the day, got pulled into the office. They asked me what the difference was between tin and iron. I said they were different elements. The 3 people in the office laughed, told me they were the same thing, just different settings on an extrusion machine, and then fired me. I have no idea why they would want to sell iron and tin together as iron, or how a company whose sole income is selling metals by the kilo wouldn't know the difference between iron, about a dime a kilo, and tin, worth about $20 a kilo at the time. Next story. Years ago, I had a sales job I hated. Made a vague post on Facebook about it. One of my coworkers took a screenshot and reported it to the company. Some bigwig came in for a meeting with me and the manager. They asked about my job satisfaction and suspended me without pay while they, quote, investigated. I applied for unemployment and was denied because it was considered a policy violation. The union fought for my job back. I was offered my job back with no back pay if I came back on a final written warning, and if I had agreed to allow them to sue me for $5,000 if they so much as thought I talked about the terms of my return. And considering the union rep's penchant for gossip, I figured he would blab and they would blame me. I'd be out $5,000. I told them to go crap in their hats and got a different job. Next story. I was doing a great job, my dream job. I worked hard for it, obtained the right diploma, etc. Loved it. They loved me back. Everything was fine, but a new law came out, and they had to replace me because the law forced them to give the position to someone between 16 and 25. I was 19, but they couldn't have a diploma, and they had to have difficulties at school to, quote, help young people that dropped school or didn't pass their exams, giving them the opportunity to work even if they come from poor families. I was from a poor family, not the worst, but it was still difficult. I struggled a lot and worked years for it. I understand why kids and teens from difficult backgrounds need extra help. I agree with it and generally support it. But after I lost my dream job, I struggled a lot to find a new one. Had to move back to my parents' place. Then had several very difficult jobs and ended up with a burnout and had to stay a few weeks at the hospital. I'm now 30, back to health, and I have to start all over again. I'm back on studies again. I hate it, but have no choice if I want to work again in something I like. It's even harder now since I'm older. My memory isn't the same, and I have a toddler now. The guy that took my job, left after 2 weeks because he didn't like working. They then had several like him who wouldn't show up or just didn't care or would arrive high or drunk. It took them 5 years to find someone good again, but then they had to train him for 2 years, so they lost 7 years in the story. I lost 11. Next story. I refused to carry 2 large bowls of soup to a table because I'd been hired to be a barista. I had no serving experience and I was scared of burning myself. I just told my manager I'd come back for the second bowl. Mind you, this was more like fast casual restaurant, like a fancier Panera, not a sit-down place. He told me to go home because I wasn't a right fit. He was right. I had 2 degrees and was doing food service to pay the bills until I got a full-time job. I wasn't going to risk scalding myself at a place that didn't even offer me health insurance just to appease some over-the-hill frat boy on a power trip. I hate that bosses treat their staff like crap, especially in food service where the customers are already such a delightful part of the job. People just have to take it because they don't have a lot of options and need references from jerk bosses. Next story. I didn't go to church. I worked on a farm in bumfrick Bible-thumping country, and the owner wanted to get rid of everyone who was born in the U.S. or had a green card because he could get a bunch of undocumented immigrants in to do our jobs for pennies an hour compared to dollars an hour, so he basically used any reason he could find. It worked for a while. That is, until some disgruntled former employee remembered that this was the height of Trump's Send 'em Back campaign and called ICE. The farmer lost his entire workforce and had some major fines, meaning he couldn't hire any new employees, legally or illegally. Next story. I was fired on my 3rd shift as a hospital operator for being late. Well, why is the late in quotes, you ask? Or maybe you don't, because you can't read it, but I can. It's in quotes. Well, it was because I was only 6 minutes early for my shift, not 10 or more as she wanted. Had I known then that was wildly illegal to require someone to be at work while not paying them, I would have marched straight down to HR. Sad story, though. That lady was fired a few years later for embezzling like $100,000 over 5 years, literally getting cancer after and dying in like 6 months after the firing. I mean, that lady sucked, but holy crap. That is the entire cosmos bending you over. Next story. College job, mall security. I got fired for racing the rental wheelchairs after closing hours. Did I do it? Yeah. Was it the dumbest thing I could have been fired for? Hell no. It could have been 1, sunbathing nude on the mall roof. 2, doing donuts in the security truck. 3, building bike jumps in the closed Montgomery wards and then riding my mountain bike through the course. 4, playing paintball in the vacant demoed space behind the construction wall. 5, opening the recently closed diner, firing up the flat top and cooking the case of gyro meat that was left in the fridge, and sharing food with all the employees working that day. There was probably way more. Gyro, I've never had it, and I have no idea how to say it. I know it exists. I know it's a thing. Is it gyro? 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 There's no way it's just gyro. Let me know how to say it, please. I could look it up, but it's more fun to have YouTube comments say it. Next story. Told my manager I broke my leg. It was in a cast. And he told me that a broken leg was a funny excuse because I could walk fine. I said, dude, my leg is in a cast. Can you not see I'm limping either? His reply, hey, we can all see you're faking that limp, and that's not a real cast. I had enough and said, screw it, quietly, followed by, well, what? Are you going to make me get a doctor's note? Him, no, I'm sick of your slacking off. I had 5 days off the whole time I worked there. For my leg, 3 days, and 2 days for sick leave. You're fired. I just took off my uniform and limped out. True screw this crap, I'm out vibes. Next story. One of my first jobs as a kid was doing expo at a restaurant. The owner's son was also one of the managers and was known to be a jerk. I had only been there a week or so and was doing expo because it was essentially training to be a server, which I had planned to do once I turned 18. Anyway, jerk manager comes into the kitchen, grabs a tray of food, and asks me what table it goes to. I say 14. He walks out of the kitchen and immediately returns, having seen that no one was seated at 14. Goes ballistic, tells me to get the hell out. He never wants to see my face in the restaurant ever again, etc., etc. Turns out the ticket said 17, not 14. The other manager, who was my actual boss, apologized to me and everything, but couldn't do anything about it. Never worked in a restaurant after that. Makes me wonder how different my life would have been had that not happened. Next story. I got fired from McDonald's because they were looking on the camera for someone stealing the turkeys that they give out for working on Thanksgiving, and they saw that I kissed my girlfriend in the back of the store where no customers could see. I grabbed her hand when she was walking away, in a cute way, and apparently that said I looked like I was forcing her to do something she didn't want to do. I was the aggressor, so I got let go, but she didn't or whatever. I was in high school, didn't know how to tell my family I lost my job. I just said that a lot of college kids were home for the holidays, so I wasn't on the schedule. I just kept going up there to see if I could get my job back. Maybe a month or so later, I did. Also, me and my girl are still together 6 years later. Next story. I was 18 working in a daycare. The most inefficient daycare ever. I had a classroom of 30 plus 3-year-olds to manage on my own, despite having nothing more than a handful of years babysitting. Our director hired a professional daycare teacher to be the lead teacher in my room. Hey, great. One day we had the kids split up between us. I was on the story time rug reading half of them a story. I know I shouldn't have been sitting on the floor with them, but again, 18 and no daycare experience. She was supposed to be watching the other half. She left the room and didn't say anything to me. One of those children bit another child while she was gone, and since I was the one in the room, it was my responsibility. Next story. I worked at a restaurant as a hostess/go-to when I was 17. My manager tried to call me in on my day off. However, I was over an hour and a half away going tubing down the river with my friend and her family. I wasn't going to ask my friend's family to ruin their trip by turning around and taking me to work. Had no way to get back myself as I didn't drive. My manager told me if I didn't come into work to not even bother picking up my last check. Dude stole our tips for his coke habit and would scream at me inches from my face for things that weren't my fault. I was the youngest employee, so I think he saw me as weak, someone he could take his anger out on. A waitress yelled at him, then quit on the spot when he screamed at me until I was in tears one night. And the next day was the day he fired me for not coming in. Next story. My first job was at Starbucks, and I was fired after 3 months because I followed Starbucks' policy to give my parents free drinks because they complained to me and another barista who was present about how their drinks that morning had been burned by one of the newer workers and they weren't even drinkable. They had a policy where if you weren't satisfied with your drink, you get a free one. Anyway, a week after that happened, I got called into the manager's office and told me they saw me collaborate with my parents to steal drinks, in their words, and they fired me. Next story. My boss left early and asked me to put these letters in the corresponding already addressed envelope once they came off the printer. Well, I happened to notice several very bad grammatical errors, so I went to my other boss who was still there and let him know. My bosses were a married couple running the business. He was horrified to see that she'd been sending out correspondence with such horrible grammar. He then asked me to retype them correctly. She fired me for reading private documents above my pay grade. I was the administrative assistant, so it was well within my pay grade. I got a better job and they lost business once their customers got wind of what happened to me. Serves her right. Next story. I was working at a Boy Scouts camp as a manager in the cafeteria. My ex was also working with me doing the same thing. My ex got really fed up one day about something our boss did and wrote them this long, petty email talking about how the lodging was crappy and we aren't paid enough. He He put my name in the email and said I was way underpaid for the amount of hours I put in. I never said anything about this to them or emailed them, but the next day they fired both of us without an explanation to me at all. Next story. Worked at Sbarro in the 90s in a mall right out of high school. New boss fired me because he found out I was best friends with a guy that had been dating one of his employees at a previous job. My friend and her had dated for months before she started working for a new boss. Friend treated her like crap, and apparently she would come into work crying all the time. New boss was an idiot. I was fine with being let go. I made a bunch of friends working there, and they quit after hearing why I was fired. So I won in the end. Next story. Not my story, but my daughter's. First, in the first couple of weeks, she was in training and made a minor mistake on an order at a family-owned pizza place. The owner told her she wasn't being fired because she's pretty. Whatever, she made sure to do better. A couple of weeks later, she learned that a delivery driver lived close by and would drive her home sometimes. The owner told her he didn't like her hanging out with the guy, so they made a point to avoid each other on the clock. About 2 minutes after she left one night, the owner called to ask how she's getting home. She rightfully said that's not his business, and he fired her. Next story. Schedule was posted on Sunday for Monday through Sunday, so if you worked Monday, you wouldn't know until the day before. I called Sunday at 12 p.m. to find out if I worked that Monday, and the answer was no. I work Tuesday at 5, so I'd see the rest of the schedule then, though I could ask about any specific day if I was planning something. But normally they would just tell you your first day, and you'd see when else you worked when you came. Naturally, I didn't go to work on Monday. Tuesday morning, I get an angry call about where I was the previous night and why I didn't show up. I'm like, I don't work until 5 tonight. Apparently, the manager whom I'd talked to on Sunday and was the one calling me changed stuff around after I called, putting me Monday night. I was supposed to call on Monday to, quote, make sure I wasn't supposed to work. And since I no-call, no-showed, which is a no-tolerance thing there, I got fired. I was livid, but also relieved. It was a BS job anyway. But man, I was not ready to not get a paycheck that week. Next story. I was fired from a pizza delivery chain. I was scheduled to come in for the afternoon shift. When I arrived, my manager informed me that a scheduled delivery needed to go out and had to be there at the time I clocked in. Instead of telling me to come in early or keeping the previous delivery a little later, there was only one scheduled for each shift because of the slow hours until night. They decided to just let me know when I got there. $200 worth of pizzas and soda. So I was 20 minutes late right off the bat by the time I got there. It was at a college campus with no room number or hall name. After calling the customer, I was forced to park on the side of a busy intersection because the parking lot was roped off for construction. Customer came out with 1 or 2 students and refused to let me help them carry inside. By the time I got back, my boss pulled me aside and said since I was at least 30 minutes late and had, quote, refused to help bring them inside, they wanted a refund. Corporate was called, refund was given, and corporate told my boss to fire me, all before I'd even made it back from the delivery. She didn't tell me I was fired. She just told me to go home for the day because corporate was mad. It was only the next day when I couldn't clock in that I called her phone, and she told me what she meant. I'll add this was my only mistake I'd made in 6 months I'd been working there. I'm surprised corporate cared that much over $200 that they fired you. Like, surely corporate has bigger fish to fry, right? Unbelievable, man. Not that any of this was even your fault to begin with. Anyway, that's the last story for today. Have you ever been fired in a crappy way from a job? Let us know in the comments. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.